Well, if you're anything like me, you no longer listen to music in the car because all I do is listen to podcasts. And one of the best, especially when it comes to covering local issues, is YXE Underground, hosted by Eric Anderson. I love this podcast because it tells some of the hidden stories here in our city of Saskatoon. And I'm very happy today to be joined by Eric Anderson as they are getting ready to launch season 4 of YXE Underground. Eric, thanks for chatting with me today. Let's go back to the beginning of absolutely great to have you with us, Eric. Let's go back to the beginning a bit, if you don't mind, before we talk about the new season. I know you have a traditional broadcast background. I worked at CBC for some time. How did the podcast come about, and what made you decide that you wanted to get into this medium?
That's right, Simon. First of all, yeah, thank you again for the kind words. And when I was working for CBC, about the last year I was there, I just felt like we were often going to, when I was working on our current affairs radio shows, we were often going to the same people again and again, and that was mostly because we didn't have a lot of people on the team, and we were working really hard, and it takes time to really dig into a community and find stories. And so when I left CBC and moved to Sherbrooke in 2016, I found that I really missed radio in terms of interviewing people. And then I also found that for the first time in my life, I had a bit of personal and professional balance in terms of work-life balance. So I thought, there wasn't really anything locally like this in terms of a podcast that would feature people that were doing really great things, but kind of flying under the radar a bit. And I thought, I have the training, I have the skills, I have the technical knowledge to do it. The only thing that's kind of stopping me is sort of my own sort of doubts or fears. But I thought, let's just roll with it. So it has been a wonderful experience ever since. And the best part has just been meeting so many amazing people, Simon, throughout these last few years and going into a 4th season. There are so many people that I've met that I don't think I would have if not for the podcast. So I feel very lucky and privileged to have this medium, this podcast to tell these stories. And the fact that people are listening to is just an added bonus too. I wasn't sure if anyone was going to listen, but people are, and so I'm very grateful for that.
You've actually been able to help the community. You've given back. Do you mind talking a little bit about the charitable component of YXE Underground?
Yeah, that has been that has been a really kind of a really pleasant surprise. I did not start off the podcast thinking that there would be this charitable component to it, but it's really developed kind of a grassroots thing. So what I've done is through working with some local different graphic designers here in the city, Don Sparrow, Craig Wilson, and then with Void Gallery, who does silk screening, created a lot of podcast shirts, a lot of YXE Underground podcast shirts, and then in selling them to listeners and people, donating all the money to different charities. And so the two that I've really focused on in the first 3 seasons of the podcast have been Saskatoon Food Bank. So we raised over $1,000 for Saskatoon Food Bank and all the amazing work and programming that they do. And then just under $4,000 to Prairie Harm Reduction. And I was fortunate enough to do a couple of podcast episodes with different staff at Prairie Harm Reduction. Such an eye-opening experience, Simon, learning what they do, the challenges that they face, and then obviously with them not receiving the provincial funding that they were hoping for, and there is a strong need.
Season 4 of YXE Underground, as we mentioned, launching this week. Without giving too much away, anything you can tease, anything you can tell the listeners or potential listeners what they can expect this year?
So the September episode focuses on safe and affordable housing. And the reason why I wanted to focus on that is throughout the past 3 seasons, in interviewing various people about certain issues in our city, oftentimes finding a safe and affordable home is at the root of a lot of these issues, whether it is addiction or mental health. Just having a safe place to call home is at the root of a lot of these issues. And so I really wanted to find a way to show what was happening in terms of of our community regarding, you know, the homeless population, safe and affordable housing. So I'm really excited for that episode in September. And then in October, I'm interviewing or featuring a woman named Katie Suk. And Katie has an acreage. Her and her husband Aaron have an acreage outside of the city, and it's called Restoring 71. And it's a really, really unique place where they basically invited people out onto their property, and it's natural prairie habitat, and why they've done this and how they've done it is absolutely fascinating. And it's a really, I think, a unique perspective in terms of how we can work together to conserve our natural habitat around Saskatoon, but then also how we can enjoy it in a safe and meaningful way during these crazy COVID times. So those are the first 2 episodes, and I think listeners will hopefully connect with them in many different ways.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into the best way for listeners to do that. Eric, how can folks find YXE Underground?
That's right. So you can find YXE Underground on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, basically anywhere that you find your podcasts. And I also have a website, YXEunderground.com, has every single episode that I've put out in the last 3 years. And you can follow the podcast on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram as well. So all the social media channels, as I'm sure you know, you got to feed the social media, but it's a great way to connect with listeners as well.
Absolutely. Can't wait for season 4, Eric, and also can't recommend YXE Underground highly enough. It's a great listen. Thanks so much for chatting with us today, and enjoy the upcoming season.
Thank you so much, Simon. I sure appreciate the time and the work that you do.